The light of 1,000 ancient suns, captured and tamed, filtered through the crystalline canopy of the Concordia, illuminating the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. This space station, a marvel of engineering that predated most of the civilizations currently inhabiting it, was a city-sized testament to order, a ringed jewel of polished chrome and living crystal, hanging in the silent, star-dusted void at the galaxy's core. Here, for millennia, the great powers had gathered to debate, legislate, and maintain a carefully constructed peace that spanned countless systems. Today, the agenda was routine, almost mundane, the formal assessment of a newly discovered species, from a minor star in the Orion Spur, designated Sol 3, whose inhabitants called themselves humans. Ambassador Cathar of the Catarian hegemony stood at the central podium, his tall, chitinous form gleaming under the soft, ambient light. The Catarians were a species built on data, their entire society a complex algorithm of logic and probability. Emotion was a variable they had long ago deemed inefficient and bred out of their lineage. His voice, a series of precise, melodic clicks translated instantly by the chamber's universal field, echoed with the detached certainty of a machine delivering a final calculation. He gestured with a slender, three-fingered hand towards a vast, holographic display that floated above him, showing a rotating blue-green sphere. "Esteemed members of the Council," he began, "my hegemony has completed its preliminary analysis of the species designated humanity. Their homeworld, which they call Earth, is a Class 12 planet, rich in biodiversity but plagued by atmospheric instability and tectonic volatility, factors that have clearly shaped their chaotic development. On the display, images flashed by, sprawling, disorganized cities packed together, vehicles spewing chemical fumes, and historical footage of brutal, primitive warfare. The other council members watched with varying degrees of interest. The Luminians, beings of pure, coherent energy held within crystalline shells, pulsed with a soft, condescending light. The Grok, massive silicon-based lifeforms resembling craggy, sentient boulders, remained utterly still, their thought processes too slow and deliberate for overt reactions. Cathar continued, his analysis sharp and cutting. Their technological progress is, admittedly, rapid. They achieved faster-than-light travel through a crude, brute-force method of space-time manipulation, a method we abandoned as inefficient eons ago. Their energy signatures are loud and unsophisticated. Their primary military doctrine, as far as our deep scans can ascertain, still relies heavily on kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Think of it, members of the Council, they still throw rocks at each other, albeit very, very fast rocks. A low ripple of amusement, a sound like shifting sand, came from the xylopod delegation, a communal insectoid race. Cathar pressed his point, bringing up charts filled with projections and data streams. Their history is their greatest defining characteristic and their most profound weakness. It is a continuous, unbroken cycle of self-inflicted violence. They war with each other over resources, ideology, and even simple pride. This constant conflict has bred a culture of paranoia and aggression, but it has not led to true strength, only to a refinement of their own primitive savagery. They are a fractured species, divided into nation-states that barely tolerate one another. Their potential for galactic contribution is therefore minimal until they can be unified and pacified under a more stable, logical system of governance. Our system. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the ancient chamber. Therefore, the Catarian hegemony recommends that humanity be classified as a Level 4 developing species. They require paternalistic guidance. They need to be shown the path away from their own self-destructive tendencies. We propose sending a diplomatic fleet with a clear and firm mandate to integrate Earth into the Council's Protectorate program. They are not a threat. They are children, squabbling in a sandbox, who have just discovered a bigger playground. It is our duty as their elders to take away their sharper toys before they hurt themselves or others. The Luminians pulsed in agreement. The grok rumbled a low-frequency affirmation. The Council's decision was all but made. Another simple entry in the endless logbook of galactic administration. Meanwhile, half a galaxy away, where the ancient light of the Concordia's star was still just a faint, insignificant twinkle in the night sky, General Anya Sharma of the United Earth Defense Force stared at a similar set of data, but she saw a completely different picture. Her office was not a grand chamber of crystal and light, but a Spartan functional space deep within the Cheyenne Mountain complex, surrounded by meters of solid granite. The only light came from the cool blue glow of her own holographic interface. Sharma, a woman whose face was a roadmap of past battles and sleepless nights, was everything the Council was not. Practical, weary, and utterly unimpressed by pedigrees. She had the Council's assessment, intercepted and decrypted by the UEDF's Intelligence Division hours before Cathar had even cleared his throat to speak. A wry, dangerous smile touched her lips as she read their conclusions. "Children," she muttered to the empty room, the word laced with irony. "They think we're children." She swiped a hand, and the display changed. Gone were the images of polluted cities and historical battles. Instead, a live feed showed a silent, dark shape moving through the asteroid belt beyond Mars. It was a Ghost-class destroyer, the Stalker, one of 36 ships in the fleet that the Council's deep scans had completely failed to detect. Its hull was coated in a metamaterial that didn't just absorb sensor pings, but actively bent space-time around the ship, rendering it virtually invisible to all known detection methods, except for the subtle gravitational distortions it left in. Its wake, a signature so faint it was indistinguishable from a small asteroid. Another swipe of her hand brought up schematics for the Thor orbital platform network. The Council had dismissed human weapons as kinetic projectiles. Sharma smirked. They were not wrong, but they were thinking of cannons. They had no concept of a 200-ton tungsten rod, guided by a low-level AI, and dropped from orbit at a fraction of the speed of light. They had no data on a weapon that needed no explosive payload, because its sheer kinetic energy could crack a continent's tectonic plate. The Council saw humanity's history of internal conflict as a weakness, a sign of chaos. Sharma, who had studied the rise and fall of empires from Sun Tzu to the Ares Mons campaign, saw it as their single greatest strength. Every war, every skirmish, every desperate struggle for survival had been a crucible. It had forced humanity to innovate at a terrifying pace. While the Council's member races had stagnated for millennia in their comfortable, ordered peace, humanity had been locked in a planetary arms race with the cleverest, most ruthless, and most unpredictable enemy it could find: itself. They had learned to fight in jungles, deserts, Arctic wastes, and the vacuum of space. They learned to think like insurgents, like tyrants, like rebels. They learned that the most effective weapon was not the one with the biggest energy signature, but the one your enemy never sees coming. The Catharians, for all their logic, had made a classic data analysis error. They confused the map for the territory. They had analyzed the data that was easily available, the public networks, the loud energy signatures, the historical archives. They had not accounted for human secrecy, paranoia, and the deep-seated cultural instinct to never, ever show your full strength to a potential stranger. The final part of the Council's message arrived on her private terminal, a formal, condescending invitation to accept their guidance and join their protectorate. General Sharma leaned back in her chair, the blue light of the holo display reflecting in her dark, calculating eyes. The message spoke of a diplomatic fleet being dispatched to ensure a smooth transition. She knew what that meant. It was a velvet glove, but an iron fist was held in reserve. Let them come, she thought. They're about to learn the difference between observing a sandbox and stepping into a hornet's nest. Her job wasn't to prepare for a diplomatic meeting. Her job was to prepare for the moment the galaxy's self-proclaimed adults realized that the children had been building weapons in the basement that they couldn't possibly comprehend, and the universe was about to get a lot more interesting. The tranquility of the Omicron 7 system was a painter's dream, a swirling canvas of cosmic dust and nebula gases centered around a magnificent gas giant, Scorra Prime. Its atmosphere was a deep, mesmerizing vortex of sapphire and violet, and, orbiting it like loyal children, were the Score trade ships. The Score themselves, a gentle, amphibious species with large, empathetic eyes, were merchants, not warriors. Their vessels were not built for combat, but for commerce, bulbous and brightly colored, resembling magnificent sea creatures swimming through the void as they harvested rare atmospheric isotopes from their homeworld. For centuries, this had been their existence, a peaceful cycle of trade and prosperity under the distant theoretical protection of the Galactic Council. This peace was shattered without warning. A sickness tore through the fabric of space-time at the system's edge. It was not the clean, precise rupture of a standard FTL drive, but a ragged, festering wound in reality. From this wound bled the ships of the Zila Collective. They were not ships in any recognizable sense. They were cancerous growths of dark, pulsating biomass fused with jagged metal, propelled by an energy that seemed to drain the very light from space. There were no hailing frequencies, no declarations of war, only a singular, hungry purpose. Corrosive torpedoes, living organisms that writhed as they flew, slammed into the unarmed Score freighters, their hulls dissolving like sugar in water. Energy-leaching beams, sickly green tendrils of light, latched onto the fleeing vessels, silencing their engines and life support, leaving them as cold, dead prizes to be consumed. The Score Defense Fleet, a tiny collection of outdated patrol cutters, mounted a valiant but pitiful resistance, their conventional energy shields flickering and dying against the Zilar's unnatural onslaught. A desperate, terrified plea for help, encoded with the Galactic Council's emergency protocols, screamed out from the system's central comms buoy, a final cry for aid, before it too was silenced by a wave of chittering biomissiles. The news of the slaughter, traveling at the speed of light, reached the Concordia with cold, digital indifference. In the Grand Chamber, the initial reaction was not alarm, but a slow, bureaucratic stirring. Ambassador Cathar, ever the analyst, immediately questioned the validity of the data. The Xylar Collective is a dormant threat, a historical footnote, he clicked, his voice calm. Their energy signatures do not match our archives. This could be a sophisticated pirate attack disguised to incite panic. We must dispatch a long-range probe to verify the aggressor's identity before committing any council assets. The Lumini delegate pulsed with a soft, violet light of deep concern. A most troubling development, it chimed. The potential loss of life is regrettable. I propose the immediate formation of a subcommittee to investigate these treaty violations and formulate an appropriate, measured response. Other members murmured their assent, their ancient sense of time unburdened by the urgency of a species dying in real time. The debate began, a meandering river of procedure and protocol, discussing sanctions against unknown enemies and the logistical challenges of mobilizing the nearest peacekeeping fleet, which was 3 full cycles away. It was into this placid sea of inaction that a new voice cut through, sharp and clear. While you debate designations and form committees, the Score are being exterminated. Ambassador Lena Petrova of Earth stepped forward. She was a stark contrast to the ancient beings around her. Young by their standards, her form solid and biological, her face etched with an intensity they mistook for youthful impatience. Humanity's long-range sensors positioned near the border confirmed the aggressor is the Zeelar Collective. Our historical analysis, which you dismissed as chaotic, is filled with examples of such lightning raids. A predator does not announce its hunt. Waiting for a probe is a death sentence for the score. She projected a tactical map from her wrist-mounted device, showing the Xylar's methodical advance, highlighting their trajectory towards the score's primary civilian habitat on the system's third moon. The United Earth Defense Force can have a relief contingent in system within 10 hours. We ask for the Council's sanction to intervene, to defend the lives you are sworn to protect. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Cathar turned his head slowly, his multifaceted eyes focusing on Lena. "Ambassador Petrova," he stated, his tone dripping with condescension, "your species' enthusiasm is noted. However, your relief contingent, consisting of a handful of primitive kinetic vessels, would be a meaningless sacrifice. You misunderstand. The scale of galactic conflict, unsanctioned military action, is a violation of Council law. Stand down. Your offer is logged and dismissed. We will handle this the proper way." Lena held his gaze, her expression unreadable, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod before stepping back. But on the other side of the galaxy, the Council's debates were irrelevant noise. General Anya Sharma was not debating, she was commanding. On the main screen of the Cheyenne Mountain Command Center, she watched the same tactical data Lena had presented, but her view was augmented with dozens of encrypted intelligence streams. She saw the Xylar's formations, their energy usage, the firing patterns of their corrosive weapons. She saw their weakness. They were a swarm, powerful and overwhelming, but they lacked centralized command, each ship acting on a hungry instinct. They were predictable. "They're sloppy," Sharma said to her tactical officer. "They're so used to their targets breaking and running, they don't screen their flanks. They're overconfident." She looked at the blinking icon representing the scores. Final defensive perimeter, a perimeter that was rapidly collapsing. The Council had dismissed her forces. Cathar had warned her to stand down. Protocol demanded she wait, but protocol had never saved a civilization. "Commander Eva Rostova, do you have a clear FTL corridor to Omicron 7? Sharma's voice was calm, devoid of doubt. A face appeared on a side screen, the commander of the UEDF stealth cruiser Vanguard, her expression grim but ready. "Corridor is clear, General. We can be at the system's edge in 7 standard hours. Sharma looked at the timer, indicating the score's estimated time until total annihilation. 8 hours. "The Council has not sanctioned this action, Commander. This will be a ghost run. No comms, no identification beacons. Standard asymmetric warfare doctrine. Your objectives are simple. First, cripple their command vessels, the larger biomass. Signatures. Sow chaos in their swarm. Second, draw their attention away from the civilian habitat. Protect the score. Full engagement is at your discretion, but your primary mission is survival and disruption. We are buying time." "Understood, General," Rostova replied, her voice firm. "We'll give them a fight they won't find in any council archive." Sharma nodded once. "Then execute. Good hunting, Vanguard." The command was given. In a hidden dock carved into a barren moon orbiting Jupiter, a slab of absolute darkness detached itself from the shadows. The stealth cruiser Vanguard came to life, its systems emitting no light, no heat, no energy signature the galaxy knew how to look for. A barely visible distortion in space-time appeared before it, and with a silent, graceful surge, the ship slid into the FTL corridor, vanishing from human space. 7 hours later it emerged, a ghost in a graveyard. The Omicron 7 system was a scene of carnage. Wreckage of brightly colored score ships drifted aimlessly, their hulls scarred and dissolving. The sickly green beams of the Xelar lanced through the darkness, pulverizing the last few patrol cutters near the third moon. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Commander Rostova watched the horror unfold on her main viewer, her knuckles white as she gripped her command chair. The Xelar were closing in for the final kill. Her ship hung there, unseen, unheard, a phantom, a vengeance in the dark. "All hands, battle stations," she ordered, her voice a low whisper that carried through the silent vessel. "Bring tactical systems online. Let's show them what a primitive rock thrower can do." The silence on the bridge of the Vanguard was heavy, broken only by the low hum of its systems and the frantic beeps of the Xelar Collective's communications, still unaware of the ghost in their midst. Commander Eva Rostova watched the main. View screen, her face grim. Below, the final score defensive line was shattering. Their small, outdated ships were being torn apart by the relentless organic assault of the Xelar. The alien aggressors, masses of dark, pulsating biomatter studded with jagged, chitinous weapons, moved with a terrifying, unified hunger, their sickly green energy beams lancing out to consume life and energy. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. But the Council's proper way of handling things was nowhere to be seen, only the dying cries of an innocent species. "Targeting solutions locked on primary Xelar biomass carriers," a calm voice reported from the weapons console. "They're larger, slower, and our intelligence suggests they coordinate the smaller swarms. Cripple them, and the swarm goes blind." Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on a particularly grotesque Xelar vessel, a true leviathan of fused flesh and metal that was even now leaching power from a disabled score freighter. "Understood. No energy signatures, kinetic impactors only. Set them for maximum penetration, minimum explosive yield. We're not here to make a show, we're here to cut off. The head of the snake. Maintain cloaking at all costs. Fire when ready." A series of soft thumps resonated through the Vanguard's deck plating, too subtle for any external sensor to register. Moments later, from seemingly empty space, something impossibly fast lanced out towards the Xelar mothership. It wasn't a beam of light or a flash of energy, but a silent, unseen projectile, a slug of dense, super-hardened metal accelerated to a terrifying fraction of light speed. On the Xelar vessel there was no warning. The projectile struck its pulsating hull with the force of a small asteroid impact. The target's bioarmor, designed to absorb energy weapons, offered little resistance to pure, focused kinetic force. The slug tore through layers of organic tissue and fused metal, punching a clean, catastrophic hole straight through its central processing ganglia. The massive Xelar ship spasmed violently, its green energy beams flickering and dying, its smaller swarm unit suddenly losing coherence, drifting aimlessly for a precious few seconds. A wave of confusion rippled through the Xelar ranks. They scanned, they probed, their parasitic minds reaching out, but they found nothing. The Vanguard was a phantom. "Strike 2 on secondary command node," the weapons officer reported again, the quiet thumps echoing. Another invisible, silent killer struck a second Xelar behemoth, repeating the catastrophic internal damage. This time, the Xelar response was more frantic. Small, agile fighter swarms peeled off from the main attack, their biological sensors straining, trying to find an enemy that left no trace. But the Vanguard was already shifting position, its stealth field shimmering imperceptibly, its engines running at a whisper-thin efficiency that defied galactic physics. It was a dance of shadows and sudden, brutal impacts, a silent ballet of destruction that was completely alien to the Xelar's straightforward, overwhelming tactics. On the Concordia, light years away, the Galactic Council's emergency session continued, mired in the dense fog of bureaucracy. Ambassador Cathar was presenting revised projections for the score's complete collapse, moments away from confirming their tragic demise. The latest data indicates a total system collapse within 3 standard minutes. He clicked, his tone solemn but resigned. The score's resistance has ceased. A grim but unavoidable outcome, given their lack of... He stopped. On the vast holographic display in the center of the chamber, which still showed the Omicron 7 system, something impossible was happening. The Xylar formation, previously a unified, ravenous wave, was fracturing. 2 of their largest vessels, previously at the heart of their command, were now spiraling out of control, their unique energy signatures dying. Smaller Xylar swarm units, lacking guidance, were beginning to collide, turning on each other in confusion. A sensor malfunction? A Lumini delegate pulsed, its light wavering with disbelief. This data contradicts all previous projections. Cathar's many eyes widened, his chitinous face unreadable, but his internal processes were screaming. The data was accurate. His own hegemony's passive scanners, though not designed for active combat analysis, were confirming the impossible. Something was destroying the Xylar, but there were no enemy signatures, no energy pulses, no weapons fire. It was as if the vacuum of space itself was fighting back. Back in Omicron 7, Commander Rostova watched the Xylar descend into disarray, a cold satisfaction settling in her gut. Their internal comms are chaos, her comms officer reported. They're attempting to re-establish a command hierarchy. They're vulnerable. This was the moment. The Vanguard wasn't just a stealth ship. It was a platform for precision. Deploy orbital defense platforms, Rostova ordered. Full dispersal. Target their remaining command nodes and then prioritize heavy weapon emplacements. Let's make sure they know they've stumbled into the wrong neighborhood. From concealed launch bays on the Vanguard's ventral hull, not conventional fighters, but a swarm of sleek, dark rhomboids shot out. These were Earth's cutting-edge orbital defense platforms, small, agile, and deceptively powerful. They didn't rely on cumbersome energy generators. Instead, they housed miniature, high-velocity coil guns and an array of sophisticated electronic warfare suites. They spread out, silent and fast, surrounding the confused Xylar swarm. What happened next was not a grand, cinematic battle, but a meticulously orchestrated slaughter. The platforms, guided by advanced, pre-programmed AI and receiving real-time targeting updates from the Vanguard's superior sensors, unleashed a relentless barrage. They fired solid, armor-piercing slugs, thousands of them, each one a miniature kinetic impactor. But their true genius lay in their coordination. They didn't just fire. They fired in patterns designed to disrupt Xylar internal structures, targeting weak points that human intelligence had meticulously analyzed from captured samples. Simultaneously, powerful, targeted electromagnetic pulses, too brief and focused to register on general galactic sensors, lanced out, disrupting the Xylar's organic navigation and weapon systems. Ships would suddenly veer off course, their biocannons firing wildly into empty space or even into their own kind. The Galactic Council watched, stunned, as the Xylar Collective, the unbeatable swarm, dissolved before their eyes. The dark, amorphous ships were not just dying. They were being systematically taken apart, their internal systems failing, their cohesive movements shattering into chaotic flailing. Yet the source of this devastating attack remained a mystery. Ambassador Cathar's internal processes were struggling to reconcile the incoming data. His sensors showed no conventional enemy fleet. The only anomaly was a faint, almost immeasurable gravitational distortion, too small to be a ship, too transient to be anything but stellar background noise. "This defies all known tactical models," a furious voice boomed from the Telecan delegation. A race of proud, traditional warriors. What is happening? Who is doing this? Lena Petrova, standing quietly among the frantic council members, allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. She said nothing. Her silence was more eloquent than any speech. She knew exactly what was happening. General Sharma's ghost was at work. Back in Omicron 7, the battle was winding down. The surviving Xelar vessels, no longer a coherent force, were retreating, their parasitic minds filled with a primal terror they had not known in millennia. They had met an enemy they could not comprehend, an enemy that fought with an unseen hand and struck with silent, devastating force. The score, bewildered but alive, watched from their damaged orbital stations as the nightmare receded. "Commander," Rostova ordered a final sweep, ensuring no Xelar remained, then gave the command for the orbital platforms to redock with the Vanguard. The small, dark rhomboids, their work done, slipped silently back into the ship's hidden bays. The Vanguard itself, having remained cloaked throughout the entire engagement, performed a final, undetectable energy signature sweep of the system to erase any lingering traces of its presence. "Mission complete, General," Rostova reported through. "A secure, quantum-entangled channel," her voice calm, but with an undertone of immense satisfaction. "Score system secured. Xelar routed. No known galactic assets detected our presence." General Sharma, back in her underground command center, felt a quiet surge of pride. The Galactic Council, convinced of their own infallible data and predictable enemies, had just witnessed the ghost in the machine. They had seen the true face of human ingenuity, forged not in peaceful evolution, but in the crucible of constant, desperate survival. They just hadn't realized it was human, and that, she knew, was exactly the point. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons, but its ability to fight a war no one else even knew existed, against an enemy no one else could even see. The stage was set for their profound and utterly predictable surprise. The Concordia was a whirlwind of frantic energy. The usual calm, measured pace of galactic diplomacy had shattered into 1,000 anxious whispers and panicked data analyses. Ambassador Cathar, whose entire existence was predicated on precise calculations, found his processors overheating with contradictory information. The Xelar Collective, a forgotten menace, had been repelled from Omicron 7, not by a Grand Council fleet, but by an unseen force that left no energy signatures, no identifiable craft, only devastating kinetic impacts and precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. The holographic display in the Grand Chamber, which just minutes ago had projected the score's demise, now showed the Xelar in full, disorderly retreat, leaving behind a trail of crippled ships and utter confusion. "This is impossible," boomed a Telecan admiral, his armored bulk shaking with incredulous rage. "Our sensors show nothing, yet their fleet is shattered. What dark magic is this?" Lena Petrova, Earth's ambassador, remained outwardly calm, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She watched the council members, ancient beings who had for eons believed themselves to be the pinnacle of galactic evolution, unraveling before her eyes. They were caught in a data paradox. Reality contradicted their spreadsheets. Cathar, however, was not one to remain in denial for long. His species' core directive was logic, and the new data, however unsettling, was undeniable. He brought up the faint gravitational distortions detected during the engagement, anomalies previously dismissed as background noise. Now cross-referenced with the Xelar's erratic movements, they pointed to a single, rapidly shifting point of origin. A ghost. His eyes, though lacking pupils, seemed to narrow. This was no magic. This was technology, advanced beyond anything in council records. But whose? The immediate aftermath was a flurry of emergency sessions and desperate calls for clarification. Admiral Valerius of the Signan Coalition, a race known for its vast, star-spanning fleet and rigid military doctrine, demanded answers. Ambassador Petrova, he addressed Lena, his voice a low rumble. Your species was on standby. You offered assistance. Were your forces involved in this anomaly? Lena met his gaze unflinchingly. As I stated earlier, Admiral, Earth offered immediate relief. The Council declined. Humanity, however, takes its humanitarian obligations seriously. We have capabilities that your current sensor technology may not be equipped to detect, developed from centuries of needing to defend ourselves against threats our larger galactic neighbors simply never encountered. She paused, letting that sink in. Our technological development, unlike many Council members, has not benefited from millennia of stable peace. We have been in a constant state of innovation, driven by necessity. We learn fast, we adapt. Cathar's data processors were now in overdrive, furiously cross-referencing Lena's statements with every scrap of information they possessed about Earth. Their historical archives, previously dismissed as chaotic human squabbles, suddenly took on new meaning. Humanity's wars, their rapid evolution of weaponry, their repeated cycles of near self-destruction, followed by astonishing resilience. It wasn't a sign of weakness, but a crucible. They had forged themselves in fire. The very lack of consistency in their historical military doctrine, which Cathar had seen as disorganization, was now reinterpreted as unparalleled adaptability. They didn't adhere to fixed protocols because they were always inventing new ones. The Xyla Collective, meanwhile, was not simply retreating. They were regrouping, and their parasitic intelligence was surprisingly quick to learn. Their probes, sent into the void to scan for the unseen aggressor, yielded nothing definitive, but their fragmented comms picked up whispers from the edge of the galaxy, the faint, garbled distress signal that had originally alerted Earth, the Xylo's warning. The Xyla's hive mind, interpreting the sudden, devastating counterattack as a specific targeted threat from a new, highly dangerous predator, began to shift its focus. Their primary objective was no longer random conquest, but the elimination of this phantom enemy. General Anya Sharma, watching all of this unfold from Cheyenne Mountain, saw the shift immediately. "They've designated us their priority," she observed, her finger tracing the new Xyla trajectory on her holographic map. "They're turning towards Earth's systems. They learned quickly for a species we thought was driven by pure instinct." Her tactical officers, hunched over their consoles, confirmed the intelligence. The Xyla were not just swarming aimlessly anymore. They were targeting key resource nodes and population centers in Earth's immediate sphere of influence, seeking to draw out their new, unseen foe. Back on the Concordia, the gravity of the situation was finally dawning. The primitive humans, whom they had intended to paternally guide, had just single-handedly defended a council protectorate from a re-emergent threat that their own combined fleets would have struggled to contain. More alarmingly, they had done so with a level of technological sophistication and tactical innovation that made the Council's own military doctrines seem quaint. Admiral Valerius, his rigid posture somewhat softened by shock, turned to Lena. "Petrova." "Ambassador," he said, the respect now clear in his tone, "your species, it seems we have gravely misjudged you. These capabilities you speak of, are they repeatable? Are they sustainable? Can you share them?" Lena nodded slowly. "We are willing to share, Admiral, but understanding them will require a shift in perspective. Our technology isn't just about bigger guns or faster engines. It's about adaptability, improvisation, and a deep understanding of unconventional warfare. We don't just build ships. We build solutions to problems no one else has faced because they've had the luxury of peace." Cathar, having completed his furious recalculations, presented a new assessment. The classification of humanity was being upgraded, not by one level, but by three. They were now considered a level 1 species, a major galactic power, but with a unique and unpredictable profile. His data now showed humanity's industrial capacity was far greater than previously thought. Their research and development cycles astonishingly fast, their strategic thinking terrifyingly pragmatic. They were wars that had once marked them as savage, now marked them as survivors, as innovators, as species willing to do whatever it took. The Council, for the first time in millennia, found itself in a position it hadn't anticipated, looking to a new, young species for guidance. The Xelar, now explicitly targeting human space, were an immediate existential threat. The Council's vast but slow fleets would take time to mobilize and coordinate. Earth, however, was already active, already fighting, already surprising them. The new threat level wasn't just for humanity, it was for the Xelar. The Xelar, once an ancient menace, were now seen as a critical, evolving threat. And the human species, once a primitive curiosity, was suddenly the unexpected vanguard against it. General Anya Sharma received the Council's urgent request for full strategic cooperation with a grim satisfaction. They finally understand, she told her Chief of Staff, not what we are, not entirely, but what we can do. She knew the fight was just beginning. The Xelar would hit hard, and they would hit fast, but the Council had seen only a fraction of Earth's true might, a mere whisper of the storm that was brewing. They had not yet witnessed the full ingenuity, the terrifying resilience, or the unyielding ferocity that millennia of self-made conflict had forged into the human spirit. The coming days would shatter more than just the Council's old paradigms. They would reshape the very understanding of power in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer just responding to an incursion. They were about to define the future of galactic warfare, and the universe was entirely unprepared for what came next. The Xelar Collective's counter-offensive struck with terrifying speed and coordinated malice, a stark contrast to their earlier chaotic incursions. Their targets were no longer random score freighters, but vital human industrial worlds and resource-rich asteroid fields, probes of their new enemy's strength and a clear declaration of war. The Galactic Council, finally roused from its bureaucratic slumber, had mobilized its vast fleets. Crystalline Lumini warships pulsed with defensive energy fields, their graceful forms moving with ancient precision. The immense, heavily armored dreadnoughts of the Signan coalition formed impregnable walls of layered shielding, ready to engage in direct, overwhelming combat. Even the Qatarian hegemony, shedding their detached analytical approach for once, sent forward their precise, geometrically perfect battle formations, their ships moving like intricate clockwork. For the first time, these diverse fleets fought alongside Earth's forces, a fascinating if uneasy alliance. Yet even with their combined might, the Xelar's sheer numbers and their chillingly alien tactics threatened to overwhelm them. Their ships, masses of dark, living matter, absorbed energy rather than reflected it, making conventional targeting difficult. Their bioweapons corroded hulls and disrupted systems in ways no energy shield was designed to counter. Admiral Valerius, commanding the joint fleet from the Grandeur, a Signan flagship, watched with growing alarm as even his most seasoned captains struggled against the Xelar's relentless pressure. Their battles were logical, orderly affairs. The Xelar were pure, savage chaos. General Anya Sharma, however, saw the chaos differently. From her command center deep within Earth, she saw patterns, weaknesses, and most importantly, opportunities. Her tactical displays, far more intricate than the Council's, showed not just ship positions, but neural network activity within the Xelar swarm, predicting their next moves with uncanny accuracy. "They're still over-reliant on mass," she observed to her chief of staff. They push forward, expecting the enemy to break. They don't understand disengagement, feints, or using the environment against itself. While the council's fleets formed rigid lines and engaged in direct slugging matches, human forces, often smaller and seemingly less powerful, danced on the edges of the battle. The UEDF's newly revealed Spectre frigates, lighter versions of the Vanguard, would suddenly appear behind Xelar lines, unleash a torrent of kinetic slugs and precision EMPs, then vanish again before the bewildered Xelar could react. Human pilots, honed by generations of adapting to unpredictable planetary conflicts, executed daring maneuvers that baffled their alien allies. They would dive into asteroid fields, using the shifting rocks as cover, only to emerge from unexpected angles, firing on Xylar vulnerabilities identified by Sharma's analytics. They would intentionally draw Xylar pursuit into gravitational anomalies or solar flares, turning the natural environment into a weapon. Where a Cygnon admiral would deem a nebula impassable, a human pilot would see it as perfect camouflage. Ambassador Lena Petrova, now a constant respected presence in the Concordia's war room, calmly explained these tactics to the bewildered council members. Humanity's history of constant, varied conflict means our strategies are not fixed. We don't have a single best way to fight. We have 1,000 ways. We embrace improvisation. If a system is compromised, we don't abandon it. We adapt it. We repurpose it. She pointed to a live feed showing a human orbital defense platform, its energy shield flickering, being overwhelmed by Xylar swarmers. Just as the Council expected its destruction, the platform suddenly vented its remaining energy in a focused pulse, not outwards, but inwards, then collapsed into a blinding, localized singularity. The surrounding Xelar ships, caught in the microgravitational well, were crushed into dense, lifeless balls of matter before the anomaly dissipated. "They just weaponized a core breach," gasped a horrified Qatarian analyst, his click speech stuttering. This was not in their data. This was suicidal, brilliant, and utterly illogical. The Xelar were learning, adapting their tactics to counter the human element, but humanity was adapting faster. When the Xelar began to spread their formations to counter the stealth ships, human forces responded with hive drones, self-replicating robotic swarms that could be launched from any vessel. These small, agile drones would flood Xelar comms with false signals, jam their organic targeting systems, and then overwhelm individual Xelar ships with relentless, coordinated attacks, chewing through their bio-armor with specialized corrosive nanites before self-destructing in a flash of blinding light. The Council's fleets, while powerful, were often slow to react to these rapid shifts. They relied on centralized command structures and pre-programmed battle plans. Human commanders, however, operated with a frightening degree of autonomy, making snap decisions on the battlefield that often turned the tide of local engagements. General Sharma encouraged this, fostering a culture of initiative and aggressive problem-solving among her officers. She believed in the human element, the unpredictable, often irrational brilliance that emerges under extreme pressure. While Council fleets preferred to engage at long range, humanity's ships often closed to knife-fight distances, their highly trained boarding parties ready to breach enemy hulls and wreak havoc from within, fighting the Xelar on their own terms, in the claustrophobic confines of their organic vessels. One critical moment came when a massive Xylar command nexus, a floating processing hub that coordinated thousands of smaller ships, managed to bypass the Joint Fleet's defenses and headed straight for a vital supply depot that served as a logistics hub for half the Council's deployed forces. Conventional Council doctrine called for a full fleet engagement, a slow turning of massive dreadnoughts to meet the threat. Sharma, however, didn't hesitate. She ordered a human Pathfinder team, a small elite unit of space-suited soldiers, to deploy directly into the Zilar's projected flight path. The Council members watched in disbelief as the tiny human shuttle, little more than a missile, accelerated towards the titanic Zila command nexus. It slammed into the behemoth, not to destroy it, but to burrow into its organic flesh. Minutes later, a series of precisely timed internal explosions ripped through the Xylar command nexus, not from conventional explosives, but from its own. Critical energy nodes being overloaded and ruptured by the Pathfinder team's precise surgical strikes. The nexus, its coordinating functions annihilated, erupted in a silent, cancerous bloom, its destruction sending a ripple of disorganization through the entire Xylar front. This was the core of the human element, their willingness to risk everything, their ability to think outside the established rules of engagement, and their terrifying knack for turning their supposed disadvantages into overwhelming strengths. The Xylar, accustomed to a galactic community that fought predictably, logically, were utterly bewildered. They were not fighting a race that followed patterns. They were fighting a species that created new patterns, on the fly, driven by an inherent aggressive adaptability that shocked and, grudgingly, impressed their galactic allies. Admiral Valerius, reviewing the constantly changing tactical map, finally voiced what many on the Council were thinking. They are not just effective, he rumbled, watching. Human ships seemingly defy physics. They are terrifying. Their methods are chaotic, yes, but it is a chaos born of extreme precision and an unnerving willingness to sacrifice for the greater objective. Cathar, his calculations now fully, revised, updated Earth's strategic threat profile once more. No longer merely a level 1 power, humanity was now unique. Unpredictable strategic dominance, class Alpha. This wasn't just a military might the Council hadn't expected. It was a way of thinking, a spirit of boundless aggressive innovation that they had never encountered. The galaxy was learning that underestimating humanity was the gravest mistake, and the Xylar, now reeling from repeated, inexplicable defeats, were realizing it too. The tide of the war was turning, not by sheer force, but by the relentless, unyielding spirit of the human element. The final, decisive push against the Xylar was about to begin, and humanity was leading the charge, dragging a bewildered but grateful galaxy along with them into a new, far more dangerous era of conflict. The combined fleets, now operating under a loose but effective human-led command, pushed the Xylar collective back with relentless force. The battlefield was a swirling maelstrom of energy and matter, far from the orderly engagements the Galactic Council was accustomed to. Human stealth ships danced through Xylar formations, planting kinetic charges and unleashing concentrated EMP bursts that left their organic vessels spasming and vulnerable. Swarms of self-replicating drones, little bigger than a human fist, burrowed into the Xylar's larger biomass carriers, detonating in a shower of corrosive nanites that chewed through their living hulls. The Lumini, adapting their energy fields, began to use focused resonance frequencies that disrupted the Xylar's internal biological systems, causing their ships to wither and collapse. The Signan dreadnoughts, once rigid in their formations, learned to pivot and unleash overwhelming barrages into the gaps opened by human disruption tactics. Even the Qatarian hegemony, their meticulous battle plans now shredded and rebuilt on the fly, found new efficiency in coordinating their precision. Strikes with the chaotic, unpredictable movements of their human allies. General Anya Sharma, directing the overall strategy from Earth, observed the multi-species symphony of destruction with a grim satisfaction. They were winning, but it was a victory forged in a crucible of desperate innovation and constant, painful adaptation. The Xyla, for all their parasitic hunger, were falling back, their numbers dwindling, their once unshakable hive mind now fractured by confusion and terror. They had met a foe unlike any they had consumed before, a species that turned weaknesses into strengths and embraced improvisation as its ultimate weapon. The Xyla retreated into their originating nebula, a vast, murky cloud of gas and dust. Beyond the known galactic rim, a place thought to be impenetrable. The Council's traditionalists argued for a siege to simply contain the threat, but Sharma knew better. They will regroup, evolve, and return stronger, she stated in a joint Council UEDF strategic briefing. Containment is merely delaying the inevitable. We must strike at their heart, wherever that may be. Admiral Valerius, now a fervent admirer of human pragmatism, agreed. Their heart has always been elusive. Our probes simply get consumed by the nebula's unique energies. Lena Petrova stepped forward, a holographic map of the nebula appearing above the table. Our reconnaissance drones, using a new multi-spectrum cloaking field, have detected a stable gravitational anomaly deep within the nebula. It's too regular to be natural. We believe it's their central nexus, their queen, if you will, the core consciousness that drives the collective. Cathar, having spent weeks rewriting galactic tactical doctrines based on human performance, presented his analysis. The energy readings are immense. A frontal assault would be suicide. But Lena had anticipated this. Not a frontal assault, she corrected. A surgical strike. We have a plan, General Sharma's plan, that leverages the combined strengths of our fleets and the Xyla's newfound fear of the unknown. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. A multi-pronged assault that would use the Lumini's energy-draining capabilities to create temporary, localized rifts in the nebula's defenses, allowing Cygnon dreadnoughts to punch through with overwhelming firepower, all while human stealth forces, using their complete invisibility, would spearhead a direct strike on the Xyla core. It was a gamble, but it was the only way to end the threat for good. The final push into the Xylar Nebula was a chaotic, beautiful dance of destruction. Lumini ships pulsed, tearing open temporary windows in the nebulous defenses. Cygnon behemoths thundered through, their heavy cannons unleashing devastating volleys, but it was humanity's Spectre fleet, alongside a newly revealed class of ultra-fast Wraith destroyers, that led the charge. They slipped past the Xyla's frenzied defenses, a swarm of unseen predators converging on the massive pulsating core at the nebula's heart. On the main view screen in Sharma's command center, the core appeared as a vast, amorphous blob of pure Xylar biomass, feeding on the nebula's raw energy, its tendrils reaching out to control the remaining collective forces. This was the entity that had devoured countless civilizations. All units concentrate fire on the primary nexus, Sharma commanded, her voice steady. No hesitation, no mercy. The human ships, joined by a select few elite Qatarian precision vessels that had adapted to the chaotic tactics, unleashed everything they had. Kinetic projectiles tore through the core's outer layers, while specialized energy pulses developed. By human scientists working frantically with captured Xyla biological data, disrupted its internal network. The core shrieked, a psychic scream that echoed through the minds of every conscious being in the sector, a primal wail of agony as its vast ancient consciousness began to unravel. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, a desperate, galaxy-defining struggle. Losses mounted on all sides, but the resolve of the combined fleets, inspired by humanity's relentless tenacity, never faltered. Finally, with a monumental surge of combined firepower, the Xylar core exploded, not in a grand, fiery burst, but in a silent, implosive collapse. The vast, cancerous mass withered, shrinking in on itself until it vanished, leaving only a lingering, sickly residue in its place. With the core gone, the remaining Xylar forces across the galaxy, their central intelligence severed, went dormant, their organic forms ceasing to function, drifting as lifeless husks. The threat was contained not by annihilation, but by the eradication of its central will. A collective sigh of relief, audible even across species barriers, swept through the Allied fleets. The war was over. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council was a changed entity. The Concordia pulsed, not with the rigid hum of established order, but with the buzzing energy of a new, uncertain dawn. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive, was now hailed as the unlikely saviors of the galaxy. General Anya Sharma and Ambassador Lena Petrova, alongside their key officers and scientists, were invited to advise on galactic defense, their insights now considered invaluable. The Council's military doctrines, millennia in the making, were being rewritten, infused with human concepts of adaptability, asymmetric warfare, and continuous innovation. Cathar, standing before the Council once more, presented his final assessment of humanity. Their history, once viewed as chaotic fragmentation, is now understood as the ultimate crucible for resilience and rapid evolution. He clicked, his voice devoid of its former condescension. Their primitiveness was a mask for a terrifying ingenuity. They do not adhere to fixed rules, they break them and forge new ones. They are not merely a level 1 power, they are a transformative force. The Lumini pulsed with a light of newfound respect, and even the stoic Grok gave a rare, resonant hum of acknowledgement. Treaties were renegotiated, alliances reforged, with Earth now standing not as a junior partner, but as an equal, a respected and perhaps slightly feared peer. The galaxy had witnessed true might, not in ancient power or vast fleets, but in the unyielding spirit of a species that refused to be confined by expectations, that adapted, improvised, and fought with a ferocity born of constant survival. The era of underestimating Earth was truly over. The Galactic Council had learned a profound lesson, etched into their very being by the ghost in the machine and the unyielding human element. And as for Earth, they knew this was just the beginning of their story in a vast, unpredictable universe. A story they would continue to write, not with static plans, but with dynamic, surprising, and undeniably human ingenuity.